According to author Tim Sanders, innovative relationships are the next big thing. His first book, Love is the Killer App, was a New York Times and international bestseller translated into 12 languages. This former chief solutions officer at Yahoo has launched companies, built brands, and now runs a media services company specializing in business trends, new media, and human behavior. Please welcome Tim Sanders.
Well, good afternoon. I've come today to tell you guys a love story because as a salesperson with about 20 years of selling under my belt, I realize that's the story we live. The first thing you've got to do is gain confidence in your outlook. A confident outlook is the beginning of selling solutions. It is the beginning of great sales. Second thing you got to do is make deep connections, real connections, forge real relationships with the customers and the prospects alike. And the last thing you have to do is align yourself with significance, make a contribution. Let me go back to confidence for a minute. Arnold Palmer, the great golfer, once said that bad thinking got me in a whole lot more trouble than bad putting in my career. And he's right. It starts here. And when I say confidence, what I mean is you believe in yourself, you believe in your team, you believe in the brand, and you also believe in the economy. You believe things will come back. And it's a confident outlook, a way of seeing the world, a prediction you make about how things are going. And that prediction, that way of seeing the world absolutely impacts your bottom line. Don Moore at Carnegie Mellon constructed a very elaborate study. And for 3 years, he isolated various subjects, and he found out that a person who has a confident outlook, either about their capabilities or the capabilities of their customers to pay them, sold 60% more than an equally talented, equally experienced person that had a neutral or negative outlook. At University of Florida in 2009, they found out that your self-confidence was second only to intelligence in predicting how much money you're going to make in your life. Confidence is rocket fuel for sales, but it's tough. Because in times of adversity, we come down with that scarcity mindset. Dr. Stephen Covey, Sr., used to talk about this idea, that little script in your head, there's not enough to go around, not enough of a market, not enough customer dollars, and it shatters your confidence. So what's the trick then? How do we think positive during negative times? In my upbringing, my grandmother, who raised me in Clovis, New Mexico, was a real student and fan of 3 different authors: Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, and a plastic surgeon named Maxwell Maltz, who wrote a very, very cool book in 1961 called Psycho-Cybernetics. And she taught me that positive thinking and confidence are not prescriptions you give to people. That's insulting. That's like telling a person that's trying to lose weight to think skinny. She taught me that positive thinking and confidence in your outlook is an outcome of thoughtful lifestyle design. So if you want to believe in yourself more than your competitors believe in themselves, and you want to go look the customer in the eye and ask for the full rate, the full fee, if not higher, there's a couple of lifestyle changes you're going to have to make. I'm going to talk about just a couple. Number 1, feed your mind good stuff. Whatever you put into your mind informs your point of view. You cannot betray your thoughts. A lot of people that come down with this negative funk, I met a guy years ago named Eric Ekstrom. I talk about him in my new book. He came down with this funk for office leasing in Seattle. What did he do? He fed his mind poison. He got up every day. First thing he did bouncing out of bed was check his email, like a lot of people do. Gave up control of his whole morning, had a terrible mental breakfast, watched cable television news, listened to all the Chicken Littles at work, and he came down with a sudden drop in confidence. So the first thing you have to do is you got to be as judicious about what you put into your head as what you put into your mouth. I mean, think about how careful we are, except when we're in Las Vegas, about what we eat or drink. You say, I don't want to have much sugar, I don't want to have carbohydrates, I don't want to have too much red meat, I want to don't drink too much, I got to drink a lot of water. But what do we read? What do we watch on TV? Who do we listen to? Are we really being selective? Every time there's a recession, one of the things I do is to create a mastermind group of about 4 or 5 people I trust, writers, analysts, whomever, and that's all I listen to. I always analyze, I learned this from Cuban, you always analyze them from a technical standpoint, you turn off cable news. Cable news is dreadful. I hope they're not sponsoring this talk. Cable news does not care about informing you or enlightening you. I would set Dave Ramsey aside and say he's probably one of the good ones. But the news people on cable, they are taught by Ted Koppel the ladle dropper effect. That's where the story is so shocking, mom drops the ladle in the soup to see the rest of the story. That's what happens. It is when we spring out of bed every day and we read USA Today, which should actually be called USA Yesterday, and we watch cable news and we listen to hateful radio, and then we follow social media. Well, all of our Facebook friends talking about politics, it is no wonder that we think the sky is falling. So be judicious. Change your morning routine. This is an exercise. I challenge you to go home and try this. I guarantee you it'll change your life. Now, I know no one does this, but I mentioned before, my buddy Eric bounces out of bed, turns a coffee pot on, checks his email. Don't do that. Defend the first 30 minutes of every morning. What's the most important meal of the day? Why? That's true, but why? So it gives you that prime fuel, but more importantly, it informs your metabolism for the rest of the day. That's why it's very important to eat protein and not sugar when you first wake up. So it's a metabolism issue more than anything, and prime fuel more than anything. So what are you putting into your mind in terms of the kind of fuel when you first get up? What are you doing to send a message to your subconscious about whether you're ahead or behind or winning or losing, etc.? When you go online and you start your day off with a full inbox, what message did you just send yourself? I am behind. And you've given up control. You've let them tell you how you feel. Then when you watch cable television news when you're working out or whatever, you fill your head with more of that. So here's what I think you should do instead. I've been doing this for a couple of years. Many of our greatest business people ever did this. Thomas Edison did this. Henry Ford did this. When you first wake up, take the first 5 to 10 minutes to think about the coming day. I call it rehearsing my dance moves, visualizing the entire day, and 2 people that helped you at work yesterday. Could be people you work with, could be customers, etc. And if you start your day off with a gratitude thought like that, and I don't mean an airy-fairy gratitude thought, a very specific thought about something someone did yesterday at work and why they did it, it focuses your mind on what you have. And then for the next 20 minutes to 30 minutes, I want you to read from a book. I know that sounds old school. That's like ordering a CD from a shop, right? Read a book that makes you better at your job or tells you what's coming next in the world. One of the most impressive things I remember about Mark Cuban when I first met him and he convinced me to quit my job at Discovery Channel and sit on a stack of phone books in his loft was that he had read 100 books that year on all things digital, internet, web, anything. If it existed, he had read it cover to cover, marked it up like an aggressive student. He could tell you the nature of the book, the kernel of the book, and he got that idea from studying Henry Ford and Thomas Edison and all the great business people, because they read books, because reading books makes you a better leader. It fills your mind with confidence-building material, because your mind has limited bandwidth. You know, a lot of people think they can do 10 things at once and they can think of all. You can't. Your mind is designed to be actually quite small in terms of how much information it can hold. If your mind was a laptop, it would have been made in 1996 and have 40 megs of RAM. You do 2 or 3 things and you just sit there and buffer. That's your mind. I'm just being real with you. That is a good thing. If you fill your mind up with confidence-building material, and this is what Cuban did, there's no room for gossip. There's no room for envy or worry or all that petty stuff that we get focused on, and you're moving forward. Here's the last thing I want you to do. Let's say you're going to go have one of those tough meetings with a customer, whoever that customer is, and you're a little bit nervous, and I always suggest this as a way of beating nerves. Reload a success experience into your mind. Maxwell Maltz's book, Psycho-Cybernetics, said that our mind is a goal-striving mechanism. It's either our success mechanism or our failure mechanism. And no one is successful. We just become cognizant of compound success experiences. But out of false humility or forgetfulness, we deep file those and we focus on worry. And that's what we load into our head before we give a talk or make a presentation. When I have really difficult talks, like I had a talk a few years ago for the Central Intelligence Agency. That's a tough crowd, okay? They told me they never like outsiders, civvies don't do well, They said I looked a little bit like McFly, and some of the military guys might not like me. They're doing all these things that should have just scared me to death. But I had done a talk a few years before for the Army, and they told me all the same kind of things, especially the McFly point. And I had done a lot of preparation. I'd done a lot of rehearsal. The talk went really well. There was a turning point 10 minutes into it where the crowd was with me. I got a letter of recommendation from General Lattimore. And I was carrying around, I cut out the insignia of the Army and I carried it in my wallet for moments just like that CIA gig. So standing backstage, I take it out, I see it, I re-experience that entire Army thing, and I walk out on stage and I kill. Because nothing succeeds like success. So when you're laying in bed tonight, if you'll take one thing home from this, I want you to close your eyes and think of that winning moment. It may have been yesterday, it might have been 3 years ago, whenever it is, really conjure up that moment when you and your team did the hard work, did the preparation, and rocked it, and keep that at the front door. But once you get confidence back, the second thing you have to do is go out and make powerful connections. By connections, I mean, it's tim@timsanders.com. By connections, what I mean is you got to go create relationships with customers and prospects. The secret to building relationships is a very simple idea. Multiply value. Adding value is like so 2000. I mean, multiplying value is where it's at. Here's a top salesman at a company called ADP, and he puts it this way: rock stars multiply value. Here's what I mean. In our business life, if you think about the best manager you ever had in your entire life, I want you to think about what they did for you. Did they excuse you when you were sick, even though you'd run out of sick days? Did they look the other way when you misquoted? No, those weren't the good ones. The best manager you ever had in your life multiplied your value. You became smarter, you became more connected, and you became a better person for knowing them. That's how you build relationships with customers. Multiplying value sounds difficult. Very, very simple idea. Every single person in this room has 3 intangibles that they can share. You can give them away. You'll never run out. The more you give them away, the more you'll get. These 3 intangibles, I talked about it a lot in Love is the Killer app, are knowledge, your network, and your compassion. Knowledge, network, compassion. The more you give them away, the more you have. Let me talk about knowledge. Commit yourself, if you will, to educating customers. Mark used to talk about information value, and he says a great waiter gives great information value, and by the way, when they bring your credit card slip back pretty quickly too. But a great salesperson delivers information value. They teach their customers and prospects things they need to know. They are generous. That's why it's important to be a deep reader and a student of your business and a student of what's happening next. And I learned that in the field. When we went out and cut our biggest deals at Yahoo, I didn't give away Yahoo t-shirts and cups. I gave away books that I read on behalf of a customer based on the customer's business problems, and we talked about what was in that book, and I gave that book as an artifact of our relationship. When you mentor people, not just people that work for you, but especially customers, it triggers the law of reciprocity and generates a high level of trust, because especially when times are tough, customers need to know what's happening next. For those of you, the younger folk in this room that have educated some customers on how to use Facebook, and you see their eyes light up, oh, I get it, If you post a picture, you get twice the traffic on a Facebook page than if you just post text. It's a very simple little thing. They love it. They owe you for it. They reciprocate. Mentorizing is important. That's why Stanley Marcus Jr. mentored me. He mentored a lot of people in Dallas after we retired. He taught me, and I love this, he said, if you do it right, you will never get dumber by making someone else smarter. Steve Jobs said, your idea is no good, and if it was good, you're going to have to shove it down the world's throat. Knowledge isn't power. Distributed knowledge is power. So I challenge you to pick customers right now that you're going to commit yourself to educate them, and package that as the added value, the multiplied value, if you will. The second way is networking. Networking is a gift. Networking is when you put 2 or more people that should meet together and you get out of the way. And I'm going to challenge every single one of you to rethink your network power, because your network is your net worth. When you give it away, it grows, especially if you're a real live networker. So I do a lot of these events, many on your properties, And especially at a sales conference, not you guys, but especially at a sales conference, I'll be at the reception. I got my badge on it, says speaker. So a salesperson on the vendor side's talking to me at one of these events, and they kind of notice, ooh, he's a speaker. They take away the free pin that they gave me. They got a cocktail in one hand and a stack of business cards in the other, and they go, oh, excuse me, I got to go network, right? It's not networking. That's prospecting, and we should prospect, but it's not networking. Networking isn't when you try to meet people that can help you. That's prospecting. Then there are these people that they introduce you to someone, and if anything good comes out of it, you owe them big. And they're like, where's my finder's fee? That's not networking either. That's brokering. Brokering's okay. A lot of business models equate around brokering. Networking is when you put two people together that should meet, and you value creating magic out of thin air. If you haven't heard this one, this is worth repeating. Elmer Letterman is considered the greatest networker in the history of the life insurance business. He created this reputation during the 1930s. You see, he and his partner in 1928 started a life insurance business in Manhattan. Can you imagine in the 30s trying to sell life insurance in Manhattan? You think you got issues? Tough stuff. So Letterman decided that he would try to create a marketing program that solved the very problem that held his business back, and that was all the poverty, all the lost business opportunity. So here's what he did. He held a networking lunch every Friday at the Four Seasons for a decade, 50 weeks out of the year. So he'd spend the week prospecting. So for example, sir, what's your name? Tony. He knew Tony as a chef before the restaurant shut down during the Great Depression. Tony's got an idea for a new restaurant. He thinks Tony's got excellent taste. He likes you. You're the star of his lunch. Ma'am, your name? Marie. Marie is a banker who's still giving loans at the time. She takes a couple of chances. He's going to invite you because you're the money piece of the puzzle. Then finally, Mike, construction executive, gets things built on time and they look great. You're going to build the restaurant. That's lunch for Elmer, typical lunch. He would talk about your vision and how much he admires how you cook. He would talk about your wisdom in making loans during these tough times and how much you should trust him and how much you should, and he would get you glued into the conversation based on your credibility. And at 12:45, he pays the bill and leaves. Never brought brochures. Never sold anything at these lunches. If you looked at him, Tony, and you were just like a suspect, you'd never really actually bought life insurance from him, and you said I've been thinking about buying it, he'd look at you like you slapped him. He'd say, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here because I want you to meet Marie and Mike. And I want you to build this great restaurant. He did this 10 years. He could come to the opening of your restaurant 2 years later, and he wouldn't expect a free meal or a cut in the line around the block. In fact, he would look at you with real humility and ask you, how did you do it? Because he understood that networking is just a small piece of the execution puzzle. He retired in 1942, considered the most profitable insurance company in all of New York City. And Mr. Marcus took a trip to New York when he was much younger to interview Elmer Letterman. And when Mr. Marcus explained this one day over lunch to me, he asked me the question after he told me the story, son, do you know why Letterman was so successful? And I pontificated about this and that, and he interrupts me and he says, do the math. You take 3 people times 50 times 10 in a single city in crisis, and you expect nothing in return, and what have you created? You've created a reservoir of goodwill. That's where the phrase endless referrals comes from. So I want to challenge every one of you. You have so many more tools than he had. He didn't have email. You can have, I call it 3-way emailing. Is HR in the room? Don't misunderstand me. 3-way emailing is a wonderful networking tool. You see it all the time in the modern economy. That's where you introduce the 3 people. You say, this is why, Tony, they should talk to you. This is why I'm out. I want to challenge every single one of you to change your networking style. So when you get a business card, have a conversation about what you can do for that person and what they need. Write on the back of the business card who they should meet. When you enter the business card into your contact system, the miscellaneous one field is now your should meet field. And challenge yourself every week to put 3 people together Friday by 2 o'clock that should meet in your local community business-wise. You'd be shocked how many people you know, and you'd be shocked at how much business that generates in the long run and in the short run alike. The last piece of the puzzle here in sharing is your compassion. Your desire that these businesses you work with don't suffer, either emotionally because of complication or financially because of lost business. and your true commitment to them as people, treating them like friends and family, not in terms of being permissive, but in terms of really, really owning the fact that it's not a solution if the problem isn't solved. That's compassion. And pouring yourself into that and measuring yourself not just based on how much you sell, but how much solution was delivered, how much your promise came true. That heart of compassion changes everything in your business. And frankly, sometimes you got to make it personal. Sometimes you got to make it personal. Devin, a friend of mine from Software Spectrum, had won an award for selling the most software ever in the history of Microsoft resellers. One guy, $40 million. It's just, in the world of selling office software by the box, that's a huge number. And I was at their sales conference like this, and I asked him over dinner the night before my talk, I said, tell me your number one success story from this year. And he goes, wow. He goes, it was actually, number one success story was actually last year. It was the greatest success story of my life, but I didn't make a sale. I made a difference. He had a prospect that he'd been talking to, and it was a real good prospect. But he'd noticed Margaret had become increasingly despondent every time he talked to her. And finally he just said, is there something wrong? And she says, no, everything's fine. And he asked her again. She says, you opened up a can of worms. I'll tell you what's wrong. She says, my husband and I have been trying to adopt a baby for 3 years. We had found a baby in Russia. We'd visited. We'd gone out. And 2 weeks before pickup, the deal fell through. And we're just sad. We're not talking. We're just incredibly sad. And Devin said when he heard that, he was like, what a gift to me that I can give to her. Because his brother-in-law worked at the state adoption agency in Washington State, and his sister ran a support group for people trying to adopt. So he got personal. He introduced Margaret to the support group. Within less than a year, by a miracle, they got that baby. And he had with him a card that he had received. And it was the first picture of the husband, the wife, and the little bald-headed baby. And he said, sometimes you have to treat people today like you're going to treat them 40 years from now in Boca Raton when you run into them in the retirement community. These people that give us money and make us successful, they really are our friends and family. And I've learned that the message here is that you can have it all at work. And that contagion, this contagious compassion idea is the icing on your career cake. I remember one of the last things that Steve Jobs said to the general employee population. My son Anthony's been working there for 5 years. He's a film student too. I'm so excited to say that he works at Apple and not Starbucks after going to film school. Steve Jobs, in his last address, quoted, of all people, the Dalai Lama, because he's a Buddhist. And he talked about making a contribution and making a difference with your life and meaning something, not just making something. And Steve Jobs says this, and I'll close with it. If you live your life right and you give, then later, in the twilight of your days, when you look back on it, you will enjoy it a second time. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you. Thank you.